all right, you pick your assumptions. Based on the growth of the lithium supply and Tesla's 50% growth rate per year, run your finger across this graph, and based on those assumptions, you can get a feeling for when Tesla's 50% growth rate is going to stop. So in a much worse case scenario, maybe 2026, after that, Tesla slows to like a 20 to 30% growth rate per year. And it wouldn't just be like, just, flatten off quickly. It'd be like, 50% growth in 2026, 40% growth in 2027, 30%, and then it just kind of rounds off. It just doesn't stop like that. And as you pointed out, this isn't a doomsday scenario. I'm not saying that we're going to run out of lithium or anything like that. I'm just saying that growth won't be as quick as it possibly could be. I could keep going on this rant here, but I'll stop there because I have a lot to say on that topic.
Yeah, and I like your comment about it being much worse for the other incumbents is like, or for the other EV manufacturers really resonates with me, because like I'm looking at Ford, for example, right now, who I think is really executing a pretty darn good strategy. But Q1 they had minus 100% EBIT margin, something like that. I'm the number slightly off, but it's somewhere around there on their EV side of the business. 102 nerd, exactly. But yet like they're still. So they're not profitable right now, and they have to cut prices on just to clear their existing inventory. So inventory is building up. It's like, how are they going to compete when like they already are having to cut prices on a business that's not profitable today? And that's like a vicious cycle. Whereas Tesla, it's like, oh, we had to give up our 30% margins to go to 18%, but we're still self-funding all of our cash flow to like continue to invest in the future. So I think your answer really resonates. It's like, yeah, they're If you can't compete today, I find it very hard to believe that you're going to be able to compete if lithium prices go much higher and your products are already not priced well.
Yeah, and it's this is one of the trickiest parts of the video, because is there going to come a point where Tesla gets so competitive that other automakers can't afford to pay $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 per ton of lithium? And they just go out of business. So is there going to, basically what I'm saying is there going to be a point where lithium prices moderate and they just remain at relatively high levels for the rest of the decade after say 2026 of like $30,000 per ton? And if you can't make a profitable vehicle, then well, you're sunk.
So the way I think about that is two ways. One is, in the world where Jordan's assumptions are too bullish, and it actually turns out to be that there's way less lithium than he thought, and which means they're going to be at a much more expensive rate, as long as EV demand remains, which I believe is going to be the case under this scenario, especially with all the different government incentives going on. There's two things really that would benefit a company in that scenario. Like a company wins in that scenario if they have these two things. One is volume, so they can actually warrant some relative ability to get the lithium at a reasonable rate so that they can actually make a car profitably. And the second one is having as much of the supply chain either vertically integrated or have an ability to influence pricing and cost by introducing your own innovations as an additional variable to make the cost lower. Would you say that's a fair characterization in that scenario? Like, if you have those two things, you're probably in a much better place than everybody else.
Bullseye. It's
in your face, Matt.
so
and the way Jordan said that with his voice, bullseye. You could make that a ring.
That was good. Aggressive, masculine.
So, one thing I point out in the video is the battery materials make up 80% of the cost of a battery cell now, because we keep getting better and better at the cost of manufacturing battery cells. So if Tesla can bring more of this in-house, and one thing I'm pointing out in the video is Tesla doesn't actually have to get their hands dirty, literally and figuratively, in lithium mining. There's a number of routes they can pursue there. Like, for instance, they can partner with lithium mines, or they can buy lithium mines, or just help with funding with struggling miners, just to give them that extra edge. 80% of the cell cost is the material supply. So the more of that they can reduce, the more that, like, all these other parties up the supply chain, the more that they can take a cut of their cut by, for instance, getting into lithium mining, the lower the price that their battery cells are going to be. So even if these lithium prices are very high, Tesla's already taken steps to reduce the. Even if lithium prices continue to go up, I think Tesla cell prices will either remain flat or more likely that they'll continue to go down for the rest of the decade because they're going to be doing more lithium refining in-house, and they're also going to be producing their battery cells in-house. So, they can knock, 20 to 30% off the price that everybody else is paying. So, absolutely.
What's very interesting about what you just said, and I don't know if Matt or you, Jordan, you also see this on Twitter, or X. My God, I said Twitter. I didn't mean to say that. Elon, please forgive me if you're watching this. So one of the things I've seen on X is that there's a specific Tesla bear, or even Tesla Q. I don't know, but his name's Brad. Shout out Brad if you're watching this, where he says that the cost of lithium is going to go up so much that a car like the Cybertruck, as an example, he thinks that Tesla won't be able to sell for anything less than $168,000 per vehicle because of just how drastic this lithium shortage is going to be like, which is essentially going to kill the EV and it's going to make it unattainable. What is your so when I say that, what does that make you think about?
Well, the first thing I think is, why would Tesla pay that much for lithium? I mean, why not just not build the vehicle rather than building it for $170,000? Tesla will pay what they can afford to pay. And if rather than like coming out with a $170,000 vehicle, what they can do is just, shift their lithium supply from one area to another. But I don't expect Tesla to pay so much for lithium that it's going to cut into their margins. They're going to go, all right, well, what's the opportunity here and how much can we make off this if we do decide to use this lithium that's X amount of dollars? And it's also worth noting, a lot of people assume that Tesla is paying open market prices for their lithium. And as I pointed out in my video, as of December, they're basically paying half what the open market price was for lithium. So there's just so many ways where that comment doesn't even make sense to me. Maybe I don't understand the point well enough, but yeah.
Or maybe the point just doesn't make sense, because I think Brad was saying that the Tesla's price cuts were going to drop their gross margin like more than in half or something like that just in the last quarter, and that like very clearly didn't happen. So I think it's important to kind of steelman these arguments, because it's not like the bears never have anything good to say, but the doomsday scenarios almost never seem to kind of pan out.
And it's also worth noting that the IRA tax credits for the 4680 cells that Tesla's building in-house, they're going to be getting at least $45 per kilowatt hour on those. So, I expect, even though they said this last year, that the trajectory is looking good to me now, to where they can maybe get the cost of the 4680 cells that they're producing out of Austin down to like the regular market price of a battery, which is battery pack, which is like $150 per kilowatt hour. If they get like a $45 to $50 worth of tax credits throughout their supply chain for that, that's $100 per kilowatt hour at the pack level. So I'm not concerned about the battery pack cost of the Cybertruck.
Matt, go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to say that actually kind of dovetails interestingly with conversation, Farzad, you and I had with James Dauma a couple of weeks ago on here. We were talking about, Wright's law, and as you cumulatively double your production, then you should be able to see a particular or a certain percentage point or percentage rate cost reduction in that product over time. And so as I was thinking about that in the battery side, it seems like one potential counter argument against that is that so much of the cost is driven by commodities. And so, I wonder, like, as you continue to go to, 3 terawatt hours, then 6, then 12 terawatt hours, like up until the point where we're kind of like recycled at some sort of steady rate. To what extent does, price pressure cut against commodity price pressure cut against that kind of thesis? And I think you mostly answered that there.
Yeah, well, I think Wright's law will play out in the long run. But we have things like government intervention here, where a lot of these laws, like, if you're talking about the free market or Wright's law, if there's some sort of government intervention, well, that kind of throws a stick in the wheel. And so I think at least the past few years, Wright's law for batteries has kind of been on pause. But I think eventually it will catch up. And like next decade, I think batteries are going to be dirt cheap after, say, like 2030 because of all the recycled materials that are going to start coming online and all the extra. Say, if we do, because this is a really long game, it's going to take 15 to 20 years to completely shift everything over to electric. So, say if we have this really bad lithium supply crunch later this decade, 2027, 2028. Several years after that, there's probably going to be a huge glut of lithium. And that's probably going to be the last boom bust cycle of lithium once we get into the mid 2030s. And after that, we're kind of start leveling off. But yeah, there's ebbs and flows to the commodities, and they have a long life. Over time, all these material prices will get cheaper, especially with recycling, and law will apply over the long term, but there may be some plateaus on the way down. Even though battery prices have remained flat over the past 2 years, the manufacturing cost has drastically reduced over the past 3 to 4 years. So it kind of evened out.